And I rise now to proudly yield time to a person with great honor and integrity, a member of this Congress who has been on the right side of righteousness, a member of this Congress who stands for those who are among the least, the last, and the lost. She hails from the 14th Congressional District in the great state of New York, the Honorable Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. I yield to her such time as she may consume.
I thank Gentleman Representative Green for his graciousness. Today, the Republican House Majority brought to the floor a resolution honoring, quote, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's assassination was a horrific and vile attack and incident of political violence. And condemning the depravity of Kirk's brutal murder is a straightforward matter, one that is especially important to help stabilize an increasingly unsafe and volatile political environment where everyday people feel more at risk. We can deeply disagree and come together as a country to denounce the horror of this killing. And it is not a license for the abuse of power and whitewashing of American history. Today's resolution only underscores the majority's recklessness by choosing to author this condemnation and honoring on a purely partisan basis, instead of uniting Congress in this tragedy with one of the many bipartisan options to condemn political violence and Kirk's murder, as we did with the late Melissa Hortman. Instead, the majority proceeded with a resolution that brings great pain to the millions of Americans who endured segregation, Jim Crow, and the legacy of bigotry today. We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake, who after the violent attack on Paul Pelosi claimed that, quote, some amazing patriot, unquote, should bail out his brutal assailant, and accused Jews of controlling, quote, not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it, unquote. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans, far from the working, quote, working tirelessly to promote unity, unquote, asserted by the majority in this resolution. It is equally important that Congress does unite to reject the government's attempt to weaponize this moment into an all-out assault on free speech across the country, all in the name of Charlie Kirk. President Trump and the FCC are now cynically threatening to shut down ABC and any outlets who give airtime to the administration's political critics. This is a disgusting attack on the American people and the very First Amendment rights that define us as a country. It is also the ABC Corporation's responsibility to refuse to embolden and participate in this corruption and escalation of censorship. We continue to pray for Mr. Kirk's family and loved ones in the wake of this terrible act. I am thinking especially of his children and his wife, whose grief cannot be measured. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
I bid the lady good day and would proceed now, Mr. Speaker. Again, and still I rise. And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, with the notion in mind that what I have stood for, I still stand for. What I have stood for, I still stand for. It wasn't that long ago, Mr. Speaker, that I stood right over to my right, the seat next to the aisle, And Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States of America here for a joint session of Congress, President of the United States of America indicated that he had a mandate. I, with a degree of spontaneity, Mr. Speaker, right over there, second seat from the aisle, collected my portable items, about to make my departure, traverse up to the doors and make my exit as a means of protesting what the president was saying. But Mr. Speaker, as I did this, I became overwhelmed with just the notion that something was going to happen very ugly, and it would be something that would hurt people who are on Medicaid and Medicare. And I also brought up Social Security when I spoke, but these are the things that I was overwhelmed with. And as a result of being overwhelmed and understanding what was about to happen, knowing that the committee with jurisdiction over Medicaid had a mandate to cut more than $800 billion. Overwhelmed, Mr. Speaker, I did rise to my feet, and I did say to the president, you have no mandate to cut Medicaid. My colleagues across the aisle became very rambunctious and decided that what I was saying did not merit being heard, so they performed very loudly. I'm not angry with them. They performed loudly. And I wanted to make sure the president heard my statement. And I repeated myself and added Medicare and Social Security. My colleagues continued. I continued. I was evicted, and I was later on censured. Censured but not silenced. Yes, I stand today where I stood then. Censured but not silenced. I stand today where I stood then. It is best captured. Would you please bring the stand over, please, someone? It is best captured in this photo that depicts what occurred. Censured, not silenced. So I stand today where I stood then. And I stand today where I stood then because there is a CR that has been brought before this House. And if I had voted for that CR, I would legitimize what I stood against. I refuse to legitimize what I stood against when I said you don't have a mandate to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and I introduced Social Security into the equation. That's what this was about for me today. The question was whether I would stand where I stood then or whether I would now agree that what was done then is something that I condone now. I condemned what happened then. My mind has not changed. The people who will suffer will still suffer. Why would I now decide that I'm going to bless, if you will, condone a CR that continues what happened when my Republican colleagues did what they thought was right, I assume, and passed the legislation without the help of Democrats? Well, if you can pass the initial legislation without the help of Democrats, why do you want me to join in your CR? Pass this without my help. Censured, but not silenced. I stand now where I stood then. I went out and I addressed the press. I didn't go out to address the press. The press asked and appealed to me to come over. I was making my way to my home where I could watch the rest of the joint session of Congress. But I went over to the press and I said to them what I said to the president. I am on record. Why would I now decide that I somehow conclude that what was done to Medicaid and Medicare is somehow something that I would now condone. I have said, and I continue to say, this piece of legislation that was passed, not the CR, but the original legislation, the one big ugly steal of a bill, this piece of legislation, as it continues to develop, is going to hurt people on Medicaid. And if you live long enough, you're going to need Medicaid. Because if you live long enough, you're going to need some sort of long-term health care, if you're fortunate enough. And you're going to get that from Medicaid. I refuse to change my position. I stand now where I stood then. And I believe that what we are doing with the greatest cut in health care history to health care, the greatest cut in health care ever. And all we are trying to do as Democrats, or at least this one Democrat, I don't speak for the Democratic Party. I speak for myself and everybody who agrees with me. What we're trying to do is to protect Medicare. That's all that CR is about for me. It's about a lot of other things as well, but I'm trying to protect Medicare as I tried at the joint session of Congress. I'm going to stand where I stood then. And I'm proud to tell you that Democrats have produced some documents that encapsulate, that are terse but very much substantive in terms of what this appeal is all about. The style of it is, what are the elements of the Republican health care crisis? And there is a health care crisis. And the Democratic Party has passed this on to me. I want to give them full credit for it. I'm going to adopt it as my own, but I did not produce it. Says here, this is a part of the crisis. Slashing Medicaid with the largest cut in history. Well, I said that. I'm repeating myself. Some things bear repeating. Slashing Medicaid with the largest cut in history. I can't condone that. If I had voted for this CR, that's what I'd be doing. You passed it without my help before. Why would you expect me to support it now? I want to change that. I'm not a status quo politician. Next point. Dramatically raises premiums, co-pays, and deductibles for tens of millions of Americans. There are people who are living on the margins, barely capable of affording health care, and this legislation is going to make it impossible for some of them to afford health care. These premiums and co-pays and deductibles are going to go up for a good many people who can't afford them. We're trying to change that. Or I am. I support this. Goes on to say, forcing hospitals and community health centers across the nation to close. That is no joke. People are starting to see it. They're starting to express their consternation. They're starting to let the people know that somehow this must not happen. They want to change it. If they want to change it, why would I vote to continue it? I refuse to change my position. I stand now where I stood then. Goes on to indicate, setting in motion $536 billion in cuts to Medicaid. $536 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Mr. Speaker, that sums it up. That sums it up. I stand now where I stood then. I am a liberated Democrat, unbought, unbossed, unafraid, censured, not silenced. I stand for the people that I have been faithful to in my congressional district. I am going to be faithful to them to the very end, wherever and whenever that occurs. I stand for what is best to help them through these turbulent times and the crisis that the GOP healthcare initiatives have introduced to people who are in need of health care. I close with this, Mr. Speaker. In this, the richest country in the world, we cannot allow health care to become wealth care. We cannot allow health care to become wealth care. We also cannot allow health care to line the pockets of the wealthy. That's another form of wealth care. Health care to become wealth care for the wealthy. The cuts are going to line the pockets of the very wealthy in this country. That has been published. It has been accepted, it seems, by all or a good many, except me. I don't accept that. I refuse to allow health care to become wealth care and do it in the sense that it becomes the wealthy that benefit the most from the cuts that are taking place. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand now where I stood then, censured but not silenced. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time.